On Thursday, in the hospital, Wanda had a brilliant idea to help me avoid the people who were trying to get to me and harass me. I agreed right away. Just as Mary Beth was about to touch me, Randall walked in and said he needed to take me down to the basement for a CT scan. He said this would take a few hours, so they'd have to wait. As we were leaving the room, Ben muttered, "Ederl's pushing for more tests to keep Andrew here longer. He wants to make sure Andrew doesn't go anywhere until he's completely stable. I hope we convinced him, but it seems like they're pretty busy." Before Randall could get me out of the room, they vanished in the elevator. Randall pushed me back onto the bed and laughed. Helping out a fellow inmate is a good thing. He explained that Wanda had spoken with him, and he volunteered to come in on his day off to help me out. I trusted Randall completely. Friday came, and I was getting antsy. I was tired of being held captive for almost a week, unable to talk to my lawyer or my parents. Wanda told me that Ederl had left instructions forbidding me from using any communication devices, claiming it was for my mental health. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't argue. Thankfully, nobody came by to cause trouble that day. I figured they were probably busy prepping for the upcoming trial, practicing their lines for what they were going to say. I was hoping my lawyer would be there to represent me tomorrow. I had complete faith that my parents, as they promised, would do everything to help me. Tomorrow was the day. Right at 6 a.m., on Saturday I was woken up by Arlene, a new staff member. She was preparing me for the day, doing all the things that Wanda usually did. "Where's Wanda? Is she okay?" I asked. "She's fine, Andrew. Actually, today is her day off. I'm Arlene and I'll be taking care of you this morning. Wanda said a lot of good things about you. Today I'll be getting you ready for court. After I get you cleaned up, David will be in with your clothes." Arlene smiled and explained that thanks to Wanda, they wouldn't force me to wear a restraint vest today. After my restraints were removed, I could get dressed on my own before being strapped into the wheelchair. Then, David would take me to the van that would transport me to the courthouse. "Is there any problem with anything I just said, Andrew?" "Don't worry, Arlene. I'm cooperating," I replied, relieved. "I hope this hearing goes well." "I'm sorry about your situation, Andrew," she replied softly. "We usually only hold people for a maximum of 3 days. Your case is really an exception, but we're just following orders from Dr. Ederl. I don't have any complaints about you or the team here. Everyone has been very professional." I thanked her sincerely. David took me to the courthouse in a van, pushing me into an empty room to wait for the trial to begin. Finally, I saw a clock on the wall, and it felt amazing to know I wasn't completely controlled by the clock anymore. At exactly 9 a.m., I was taken into a private courtroom with only a few people present. Mary Beth rushed towards me for a hug, but I ignored her. I just held back, my fear preventing me from reacting. As I was wheeled to my table, 2 men stood up and greeted the judge, both claiming to be my lawyers. The judge frowned and sternly asked, "Which one of you is the legal representative for Mr. Stevenson?" Larry Reynolds, a public defender, declared that he had been appointed to represent me since the first hearing. But when the judge asked the other man, Ira Abbott, he quickly provided documentation proving that I had paid him from my own account. The judge turned to me, his voice grave. "Mr. Stevenson, why do you have 2 lawyers here?" "Your Honor," I replied, "I don't know Mr. Reynolds. I only hired Mr. Abbott to represent me." Dr. Ederl interjected, trying to convince the judge that I wasn't in a clear state of mind to make my own decisions. But I insisted that I had hired Mr. Abbott and wanted him to represent me in this hearing. After considering everything, the judge ruled that only Mr. Abbott would be representing me. Ira then asked for an hour to speak with me privately, and the judge agreed, adjourning the hearing. I was taken into a private room with Ira, filled with a strong belief that things might finally be changing. David, Ira, and I followed the bailiff to conference room C, with Mary Beth, Ben, and Dr. Ederl trailing behind like they were afraid the whole thing would slip through their fingers. I stopped as we entered the room. "Bailiff, those 3 are not allowed in here. Can you please ask them to leave while I talk to my lawyer?" The bailiff, hearing my words, asked all 3 to leave the room. They were stunned but had to back down. In the room, I told Ira everything, from the events leading up to the trial to my plan for the hearing. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally and marking down a few key points. When I presented the plan I wanted to execute, he was slightly surprised but ultimately smiled in approval. David, standing nearby, had wide eyes as he heard some of the details I revealed. Ira quickly reminded him that what he heard was privileged information and could not be disclosed in any form. Once we were finished, Ira went out and announced that we were ready to return to the courtroom at any time. About an hour and 15 minutes later, we were called back into the courtroom. The tension in the room was palpable as the prosecutor began by questioning Dr. Betrayal. "Yes, sir, that's correct. Mrs. Stevenson contacted me in a very distressed state. She said that her husband had lost control, was delusional, and was making irrational decisions that were seriously affecting his life. She even mentioned that he had become violent and had attacked her. She said she couldn't press charges because she felt he wasn't in his right mind, so she pleaded with me to help treat him and get him back to a normal state." Dr. Betrayal lifted his head, speaking calmly but firmly. "Thank you, Dr. Betrayal. The prosecution has no further questions," the prosecutor nodded, gesturing to the defense. Ira stood up and moved closer, starting his cross-examination of Dr. Betrayal, his gaze sharp. "Doctor, did Mrs. Stevenson mention any specifics about the accusations and decisions her husband made that she considered irrational?" "Yes, she mentioned that he accused her of having an affair with her boss, Mr. Ben Higgins, and that on the very night he was promoted, he abruptly quit his job, giving up $1 million opportunity. She believes that only someone who wasn't mentally stable would act like that." Ira chuckled softly. "And you've been monitoring Mr. Stevenson 24/7 for the past week, correct?" "That's correct." "I guess you've had numerous conversations with him to confirm the truth of his wife's story?" Dr. Betrayal was slightly irritated. "Not exactly. The conversations with him weren't about confirming anyone's story. We were simply conducting examinations to assess his mental state and determine if he was a danger to himself or others." "So you're confirming today that he is a dangerous man?" "That's right. He has been violent towards staff and behaving rudely. But to be clear, I believe we could see a breakthrough with him at any moment. After all, he still needs our professional care." Ira raised an eyebrow, his voice firm. "It's interesting that Mr. Stevenson hasn't displayed any violence at all during this hearing. How do you explain that, Doctor?" Betrayal shrugged. "I think he might be temporarily restraining himself to achieve his goals. He probably believes that acting well-behaved will lead the court to release him, just a little trick." "All right," Ira continued with a cold smile. "So how many times have you actually seen Andrew in the past week?" "6 times, each session lasting for an hour, between 2 and 3 p.m., Betrayal replied, his voice confident. Ira chuckled softly, lowering his voice. "Dr. Betrayal, I remind you that you took an oath." The judge nodded. "You may step down from the witness stand, Dr. Betrayal." "Thank you." Ira turned to the judge. "If I may, I'd like to call Mary Beth Stevenson to the stand." Mary Beth stepped up, her eyes darting nervously as she met Andrew's gaze. After taking the oath, she began to recount the events that led to this situation. "Andrew and I attended the company's Christmas party. That night, Ben Higgins announced his promotion to the board of directors with $1 million salary. Just an hour later, he became enraged, accusing me of being unfaithful to my husband. He stormed out of the party, leaving Ben and me terrified and confused because we had no idea why he thought that." Ira nodded, continuing to ask, "So, how did he react when you met him 2 days later at his parents' house?" "It was as if he didn't recognize me. He kept calling me by my maiden name and acted as if we were never married. It worried me for his parents, because they wouldn't be able to defend themselves against a violent attack from him if it happened." Ira asked again, his eyes sharp. "So, you affirm that there has never been any inappropriate relationship between you and Ben Higgins, correct?" "Yes. Ben and I simply danced a little at the party, like everyone else, in a completely harmless context. I want Andrew to understand that I love him and want only the best for him," she said, looking at Andrew with tear-filled eyes. Ira smiled, bowing slightly. "Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. I would like to call Mr. Ben Higgins to the stand." As Ben walked to the witness stand, Ira wasted no time and asked directly, "Prior to the events that led to this situation, how would you rate Andrew as an employee?" Ben didn't hesitate. Andrew was a model employee, highly reliable and talented. I had complete confidence in him, which is why I wanted him to have a key role in the company. Ira asked firmly, "Do you have any reason to believe Andrew would make such an accusation against you? Was there anything that triggered his outburst that night?" Ben sighed, looking at Andrew with sympathy. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe he was under a lot of stress, but I believe he will return to normal. He's a valuable asset to the company, and I hope we can welcome him back soon." Ben appeared somewhat uncomfortable under the sharp questioning from the lawyer, his eyes flickering with a touch of uneasiness. I can't say for sure. He's a good guy. It's just his mind that's gone astray. I really need him back at work. Ira didn't back down, taking a step forward, his voice strong and resolute. Unable to say, or unwilling to say, Mr. Higgins, I'll ask more clearly so there's no ambiguity. Testimony today indicates that your employee, Andrew Stevenson, has accused you of having an intimate relationship with his wife. To help the court understand Andrew's state of mind at that time, can you affirm definitively if this is true? Did you ever have an intimate relationship with Andrew's wife, Ms. Mary Beth Stevenson, at any time? Ben blushed, responding immediately, his voice firm. And no, I have never had any intimate relationship with Ms. Stevenson. I feel very sorry for Andrew. His mind is not like mine or yours. He's a special person, with his own perceptions. We all want the best for him. Andrew, come back to us soon. Ben took a deep breath, as if reassuring himself. Thank you. You may step down, Ira said, maintaining a composed demeanor. I myself kept an emotionless expression, remaining completely calm throughout Mary Beth and Ben's testimonies. I didn't reveal any reaction that could be misinterpreted as violence or disruption. As soon as Ben sat down, Ira approached the judge. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to present audio-visual evidence from recordings copied from the healthcare facility where my client is being unlawfully detained. The prosecutor immediately objected. Your Honor, the prosecution hasn't been notified of any such evidence and hasn't had the opportunity to investigate. Ira countered instantly, Your Honor, until this morning even the court didn't know I was representing Mr. Stevenson. As my client's attorney, I requested these video recordings from Mr. Stevenson's hospital room as evidence to refute the other side's testimony. I also have notarized documentation to ensure these recordings are unedited and accurately reflect my client's condition during his detention. The judge nodded, considering a valid argument. Counselor, I will contact the facility to verify the authenticity of the recordings. The court will recess for 30 minutes. During the break, Ira told David to take me to the conference room to relax. David brought me a Coke and a pack of cookies, keeping me away from the three conspirators. After the break, the court resumed. The videos were played, showing me sitting quietly alone, with absolutely no appearance of Dr. Ederle as he had testified. Ira raised an eyebrow, turning to the judge. Seems interesting, doesn't it? Where's Dr. Ederle? Let's fast forward to see when he shows up. Sandra, the clerk, fast-forwarded to 2 p.m., then 2:30, then 3 p.m., but there was no sign of Dr. Ederle. An hour passed and he never appeared. The judge, with a stern expression, directed a cold gaze at Dr. Ederle. Can you provide the specific date and time of the assessment as you testified before the court, Dr. Ederle? Dr. Ederle was flustered, nervously flipping through his notes, trying to find an answer. I'm not sure. I think I made a mistake in my notes, he stammered. Ira stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may, I suggest we accept that Dr. Ederle has now retracted his testimony. These videos also demonstrate that my client did not engage in any violent behavior during his detention. I can call a staff member to testify regarding Mr. Stevenson's cooperative attitude. The judge nodded, sternly ordering both lawyers to come closer. Mr. Abbott, can you bring your witness to testify right now? Yes, Your Honor. The judge adjourned the court once again, instructing the bailiff to maintain order while he, the two lawyers, and the witness went into a private room. Outside, Ira met with Wanda, a caregiver at the mental health facility, who was willing to testify but worried about losing her job. The judge requested a closed-door meeting in his chambers to avoid affecting Wanda's work. Remember, this meeting will be sealed, and no one is allowed to disclose anything outside this room. Wanda nodded, calmly recounting the events. Andrew is a very gentle person. He never caused trouble or showed any hostility toward anyone. For the past 7 days, he did nothing but cooperate, despite the injustice being done to him. The judge furrowed his brow. If he's so gentle and cooperative, why was he restrained for a whole week? Just because of Dr. Ederle's orders. We had to care for him from A to Z, which was excessive. He could have taken care of himself completely, but the order demanded we do everything. The judge nodded, discreetly ending Wanda's testimony. Thank you, Ms. Wanda. Your testimony will be sealed, and if anyone tries to jeopardize your job, I will deal with it. Counselors, we're clear on this." Everyone nodded in agreement. Wanda silently left the court through a side door, awaiting the next trial session in a heavy atmosphere. The judge called for order, his voice booming in the courtroom. "Any more evidence to present, or has the defense concluded?" Ira stood, confident and composed. "Yes, Your Honor. If I may, the defense has one more short video to offer as evidence to directly refute some of the previous testimony from witnesses. As with the other evidence, I couldn't provide it earlier due to the current situation." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Any objections?" The prosecutor raised his hand somewhat reluctantly, shrugging. "I don't think it will make a difference, Your Honor. In the interest of fairness, we don't object." 5 minutes, correct?" the judge asked Ira. "Yes, Your Honor, no more than 5 minutes." "Very well. Let this video be played. What is the purpose of this video?" Ira replied immediately. "It will clarify the motives of the parties involved, Your Honor, and it will shed new light on some misunderstandings regarding Andrew's behavior at the party." The judge nodded in agreement, and Ira quickly downloaded the video from the cloud to a USB drive and gave it to Sandra, the court clerk. The entire courtroom suddenly fell silent, as if holding their breath, as the video started playing on the large screen. Gasps could be heard from Mary Beth and Ben as they watched the undeniable images. Mary Beth, naked, engaged in an intimate act with Ben Higgins. The faces of both were clearly visible on the screen, every expression in high resolution, leaving no room for doubt. Ben stood up abruptly, panic-stricken. "Objection. Stop this filthy video," Ben yelled, his face flushed. Sandra looked at the judge, who nodded to stop the playback. Clearly, there was no need for 5 minutes. The truth had been exposed. Ben turned to me, his voice shaking with anger and horror. "Where did you get that recording? How did you get it?" Ira calmly stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'd like to call my final witness to answer that question, Andrew Stevenson." The judge nodded, but before I could speak, he said solemnly, "First, I demand that Mr. Stevenson be immediately freed from all restraints. He will be treated like a human being in this courtroom, not a prisoner." David quickly removed all restraints. I stood up, free for the first time in over a week, and walked to the witness stand. Ira began questioning me, his tone slow but firm. "Andrew, can you tell the court what that recording is?" "Yes, Your Honor. It's an unedited video showing my wife, Mary Beth Stevenson, having sex with the CEO of my company, Mr. Ben Higgins, at his private residence." Ira asked again, "Please tell the court how you obtained that recording." I recounted calmly. "I used my phone to record the incident through a one-way mirror in the room where I was being held against my will. At that time, Mr. Higgins told me that if I agreed to let my wife please him, he would ensure my promotion. I secretly sent a copy of the video to the cloud, then deleted it from my phone. Afterward, I made an escape through the bedroom window and drove straight home." Ira asked another question, his voice sharp. "Andrew, did you ever consent or condone the relationship between Ben Higgins and your wife?" "No, Your Honor, I never allowed that. I made it clear to both of them that if they continued, I would immediately file for divorce." The prosecutor couldn't stay silent any longer. "Your Honor, I object. How is this line of questioning relevant to Mr. Stevenson's involuntary hospitalization?" I returned to the prosecutor, unfazed. "I'm glad you asked that, counselor. It's directly relevant to this case. Mr. Stevenson's testimony has been proven true through video evidence. Dr. Ederle, who should have assessed my client fairly, gave false testimony, and we suspect Ben Higgins bribed him. Andrew's wife, who requested his involuntary hospitalization, has also been revealed as a liar when she claimed Andrew's accusations were baseless. All three of them clearly conspired against Andrew for personal gain. Any other questions?" The prosecutor stiffened, speechless, only able to sit down in silence. The judge finally spoke, his voice deep and authoritative. "I have seen and heard enough to conclude that Mr. Andrew Stevenson is innocent and has been subjected to torment by 3 conspirators. The purpose of this hearing was to determine whether he should be detained. Clearly, he should not. Mr. Stevenson, from this moment forward, you are completely free. The mental health facility has no right to hold you any longer. Mr. Prosecutor, I urge you to immediately bring appropriate charges against Dr. Ederle, Ms. Mary Beth Stevenson, and Mr. Ben Higgins for conspiracy, unlawful detention, and perjury." The prosecutor nodded, accepting the judge's request. Ira stepped forward, not forgetting to add, "Your Honor, before we conclude, I request a restraining order against Mary Beth Stevenson and Ben Higgins to prevent them from contacting my client. They have proven themselves to be a physical and emotional threat." The judge read the restraining order, then looked up at Ben and Mary Beth, his voice stern. "If either of you violates this order and attempts to contact Mr. Stevenson, you will face me again, and you will pay a heavy price. Clear?" Both nodded silently, their faces stunned. "Miss Stevenson," the judge continued, "you will need to contact an attorney to collect your personal belongings from the home you shared with Mr. Stevenson until this restraining order expires." He paused, rapping his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned. All rise." I stood there, taking a deep breath. My life had finally turned around. After the hearing, I walked over to Ira and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Ira. No amount of money I pay you will be enough for what you've done for me." Ira smiled, shaking his head. "I'll return that money in full. I owe your mother's family a lot, so this is part of my duty." Unable to hold back, I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. Ira drove me back to my parents' house where my car was still parked. That afternoon, I sat with my parents, recounting everything and expressing my deep gratitude for their decision to hire Ira. Later, I called the florist and ordered 3 dozen roses to be sent to the mental health center as a thank you to the staff who had helped me during my difficult time. As night fell, I packed 2 suitcases and returned to my former home. But now, it was just an empty house for me, no longer a nest. With no intention of staying there long term, I decided to divorce Mary Beth. Thinking about the possibility of Ben being there, even potentially having an intimate relationship with Mary Beth on our bed, I decided to move my belongings to another bedroom with its own bathroom, so I wouldn't have to touch anything that might be contaminated by her. Mary Beth could take anything she wanted, as long as I wasn't present when she did it. Then I found the phone I left at Higgins' mansion, now fully charged and ready in the house. I put away my disposable phone, just in case, and continued to use my old phone, now confident that Mary Beth and Ben were both banned from contacting me. That night, I had the best sleep I'd had in many tumultuous days. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my eldest daughter, Elizabeth. "Hi, Dad, I hope you're proud of yourself." Liz's cold voice immediately put me on alert. "Hi, Liz. Proud of what?" "For destroying our family with your own hands. Mom came to my house last night with Andy and Daisy, saying you did horrible things to her. She said you abandoned her at the boss's party just because of a dance. She said you angrily demanded a divorce and quit your $1 million job, just to hurt her. She also said you kicked her out of the house and got a restraining order so she couldn't get close to you." Liz paused, her voice getting more and more harsh. "You've done everything except shoot her." "Liz, Dad." She interrupted. "Mom told us not to believe your lies. You're having an affair, aren't you? All this is just because you have another woman? So, you've chosen to believe your mother and don't want to hear anything from me." "Maybe that's true," Liz replied curtly. "Then why did you call me if you don't want to hear what I have to say?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I just want to understand why. Why did you destroy your family and your career? Is it because you're having an affair? Tell me the truth, Dad." Anger towards Mary Beth for planting lies in my children's heads flared inside me. I didn't blame Liz for believing her mother, but it hurt. Mary Beth probably didn't think I would dare tell my kids the truth about the video, about what I witnessed firsthand. "You want to know the truth? Find it in court. Write down this case number, Liz, 37692, the case related to my involuntary detention," I said firmly. "What? What kind of ridiculous answer is that, Dad?" "You called for an answer, and this is the answer. Look up the records of that trial. You'll have enough information. Liz, I'm glad you're on your mother's side. She'll need all the support you can give her, especially after the divorce. But if you're still the intelligent daughter I raised, find the truth yourself in the court records. Tell Andy and Daisy that I love them as much as I love you. Goodbye, Liz." After hanging up, the feeling of heaviness hadn't faded when my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Andrew here. Who is this?" I asked. "Hello, Andrew. This is Bill Spencer Jr., the new director of the Prospects Assessment Department." I let out a sigh. "I know you and your father, Bill. You probably heard I resigned from Higgins. so we're not colleagues anymore. That's precisely why I'm calling you. Andrew, I'd love to invite you to lunch anywhere you'd like. I know there's some tension between you and Ben, but I assure you, this meeting is completely unrelated to him. I was a bit surprised by this offer. He knew I'd resigned, yet he still wanted to meet me. I smiled inwardly and decided to take the opportunity. Okay, Bill. Let's meet at Del Frisco's Double Eagle Steakhouse at 1 p.m. Interested? Absolutely, Andrew. See you at 1. Del Frisco's was a restaurant Mary Beth always wanted to go to, but we never tried it because I found it too expensive for a meal. But this time it was different. I got ready, and Bill showed up on time. We ordered our meals and started chatting right after the appetizers. Bill leaned forward, his voice low and straightforward. Andrew, I'm sure you're wondering why I wanted to meet you. Honestly, I have a bit of a personal reason. You made Ben angry, and he decided to promote me after you resigned. But rest assured, I'm not here to talk about him. When I realized why you left and the whole separation from your wife, I realized I'd been through a similar challenge. Bill paused, shrugged, then continued. Honestly, I've accepted Ben's way of life. Although facing the reality of sharing my wife with someone else wasn't easy at first. But I don't blame you for refusing. I raised an eyebrow, my voice firm. It's clear we're not on the same path, Bill. Everyone has their own choices. But that's not why you called me here, is it? What do you want? Bill smiled, seeming to be waiting for this exact moment. The food arrived, the delicious aroma wafting through the air. We paused the conversation for a moment, waiting to begin the next chapter in our story, over the luxurious food at Del Frisco's. Bill cleared his throat, a hint of sharpness in his eyes. You're right, Andrew. If possible, I'd like to test your brilliant mind for a bit. I raised an eyebrow, chuckling softly. It depends on how you want to test it, Bill. Bill leaned in, his voice low but unable to hide his eagerness. I've now taken on the role of vice president at Higgins Investments, replacing you in charge of the prospect assessment department. My job now is to find promising companies to introduce to Ben to maintain the growth that Higgins Investments has achieved under you and Don. This is the work I've done for years, Bill. Do you need me to explain anything further? Bill smiled politely. That's precisely why I need to see you. Most of the projects that you and Don proposed have been a huge success. I've only received one promising name to introduce to Ben, and it came from you. The reports you and Don left behind aren't that remarkable, but before Don retired, he spoke to my father about Simtech Medical Devices Corp. I had Simtech assessed, and the numbers are extremely promising. They're producing defibrillators, pacemakers, and ventricular support devices that compete with Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, and Abbott. I remembered looking into that company and telling Don to keep it on our radar. But Bill interrupted. I looked at the handwritten email report you sent to Don about Simtech, but it's nothing more than a rejection. You said the company didn't have the sustainability you were looking for. Exactly. That's why I didn't focus on it. It was just a future follow-up suggestion to gather more data. Bill nodded, but he didn't give up. But I bet you have a better, more promising suggestion. You know that position was practically yours from the beginning. We all knew that until you quit. Now, are you willing to share that name with me so I can have a good start for my official debut? I sighed, my voice flat. Bill, do you think I'd sunk a great company just to stand out later when Don retired? That's not my style. Simtech was the last name I mentioned to Don, but I didn't have a reason to put all my effort into it. That's the only thing I can tell you. Bill shrugged, chuckling lightly. Okay, I get it. Maybe you want to keep it for your new boss. I have to try, you know. I want a good start too. I took a sip of wine, unable to hide a hint of sarcasm. Hey Bill, go ahead. If you want to introduce Simtech, that's your choice. But the long-term results, good or bad, are on you. Bill winked confidently. I'll introduce Simtech to Ben. They're a great profitable partner. Sorry, Andrew, for trying to dig your opinion. I had to try. Good luck, Bill. Give my regards to your father. We finished the meal without mentioning Ben or other dirty business. As I went home, many thoughts haunted me. Simtech did indeed have some hard-to-explain aspects. I decided I would spend some time doing more research. As I continued with my life, news about kind-hearted Dr. Ederl reached me. After being charged with a series of criminal acts, Ederl was released on bail but disappeared with his family to the Maldives, a place with no extradition treaty with the U.S. The name Ben Higgins popped into my head. He might have helped Ederl escape to protect his secrets. But when Ederl disappeared, The prosecutor's office demanded that Ben and Mary Beth surrender their passports to prevent them from fleeing. A week later, Franny Browder, a former assistant of Dawn's, called me and requested a private meeting at a fancy restaurant. Franny was always straightforward, and I knew she wouldn't call unless it was important. The next day at noon, I met her at the restaurant. She seemed nervous when I sat down. "You look well, Andrew," Franny said. "You could say the same about you, Franny. So what brings you here?" Franny lowered her voice, hesitant. "Don't be mad at me, Andrew. I don't remember ever seeing you angry during all the years we worked together. I hope that doesn't change today." "What would I be mad at you for, Franny? We've always respected each other." Franny chuckled awkwardly. "Don't ever change, Andrew. I work for Bill Jr. now, and I really miss you and Don. Anyway, Mr. Higgins asked me to contact you on behalf of your wife. She really wants to see you. Because of the restraining order, she's not allowed to approach you unless you give permission first. If you agree to meet, she'll be very grateful. She's waiting outside in the company car. Can I tell her to come in?" I closed my eyes, sighed. "Franny, I know you have no choice. I'm not mad at you. Tell the waiter to hold the table. I'm going to the restroom. If when I come back, I see Mary Beth sitting alone, I'll talk to her. But if Ben or anyone suspicious shows up, I'm leaving." Franny was visibly relieved. "Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Higgins promised me $1,000 if you agree to meet her." I shrugged, chuckled softly. "Good for you. Tell Mary Beth to order for both of us. She knows what I like." I went to the bathroom for a while, clearing my head. When I returned, I carefully scanned the surroundings to make sure no one suspicious was present. Mary Beth was sitting there, looking stunning in a designer dress, smiling expectantly. She stood up, intending to hug me, but I raised my hand to stop her, just sat down opposite her. Mary Beth kept smiling, but her eyes were filled with a pleading look. Mary Beth gave a radiant but wistful smile as she saw me, her voice choked. "You don't know how happy I am to see you again, Andrew. I miss you more than you can imagine. I've cried myself to sleep every night since we've been apart." I couldn't hide the coldness in my eyes. "You look fine, Mary Beth, but you always do. If you don't mind, I want to wait until the food arrives and then we can talk about us. That way, we won't be interrupted in the middle." Mary Beth smiled gently. "See, my phone is on the table and it's switched off. We can talk freely without anyone listening in. You can switch off your phone too and put it on the table. That way, we'll both feel freer to share." I looked at her sarcastically. "Oh, recording, huh? I can understand why you'd be worried about that after the trial." I switched off my phone and put it on the table in front of her. "Come to think of it, that's why you set up this meeting with Franny, right? What are you talking about? If I knew I was going to meet you, maybe I would have brought a recorder. But since I thought it was a friend, I didn't think I needed to. Quite clever, actually." She chuckled nervously. "In this day and age, you can never be careful enough, my love. So, let's skip the sweet talk, shall we?" "As you wish, Andrew. The last thing I want is to make you upset. I just want to fix things between us, if possible." We exchanged small talk for about 20 minutes to kill time until the food arrived. I felt relieved to finally be able to eat without being interrupted. After a few minutes of silence, Mary Beth began, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me despite that ridiculous restraining order," she started. I put down my cutlery, maintaining a calm voice. "After all your lies and betrayals, Mary Beth, I think the restraining order is the best thing for me. Is this what you want to discuss today?" Mary Beth shook her head. "No, Andrew. I'm here to apologize from the bottom of my heart. I'm so sorry for hurting you so badly that you had to leave that party. That night was never a one-sided story. Trudy was supposed to seduce you, but for some reason you made her feel embarrassed." I chuckled softly. "As I recall, the only two people partying that night were you and Ben. To be blunt, Mary Beth, how long have you two been close?" She blushed, but then sighed and spoke frankly. "I won't lie to you anymore, Andrew. I know you deserve the truth, even if it hurts me. That night, Ben and I were together for hours until we were exhausted. For me, it was a magical experience, and I apologize for that. It's strange that both of us still don't understand how you managed to get back to that scene." I took a sip of water, responding firmly. "Mary Beth, I'm not here to discuss the details of your magical experience. That video was only meant to prove to the court that you two are both liars and conspired with Dr. Ederl to go against me. To detain me simply because I refused to participate in your wife's swapping game. Why did you do this? Mary Beth tried to keep her voice steady, but her eyes betrayed her distress. Are you kidding? Have you forgotten that you were about to get $1 million salary per year, and even more? We could finally live in luxury and just keep everything as it was. Ben really wants you back, Andrew. He's willing to replace Bill Jr. if you agree to return. I interrupted, my voice sharp as a knife. I will never go back to Higgins. Get that thought out of your head. Mary Beth furrowed her brow, trying to persuade, don't make a hasty decision, Andrew. Ben told me that he could make an offer. If you come back, there will be no mandatory intimacy between us anymore. Both you and I won't have to share with anyone. That's the only reason you refused, right? We can go back to how it was before, just you and me against the world. Didn't you used to say that? I looked at her, unwavering. Mary Beth, you act like betraying me is just a small mistake. You've destroyed this marriage, used the law as a weapon to turn me into a madman, lied about my mental health, just to keep me in your club. You betrayed me and ruined my career, and somehow still consider yourself wife of the year. Mary Beth lowered her voice, still persistent. I did it all for us, Andrew, for all the right reasons. If you go back to working for Ben, I promise you won't have to share me with anyone anymore, and we can live the life we always dreamed of. Think about it. Just then, there was a sob from behind her. She turned and saw our daughter, Liz, standing there, her face pale with tears. Liz, why are you here? Did you hear everything? Mary Beth asked, her eyes lost in fear. Liz didn't answer her mother but rushed to embrace me, sobbing uncontrollably. I hugged my daughter tight, my heart breaking, but also relieved that she had heard the truth. Dad called and told me to come hear the story between you and Mom. I felt I owed you a chance to be heard. Mom, how could you lie to us like that? I believed you, and that was my biggest mistake. Dad, can you forgive me, Andy and Daisy, for not believing you? I swear I'll never make that mistake again. I hugged Liz tightly, reassuring her, of course, Liz. I just want you to know the truth. Liz wiped away her tears, turning to Mary Beth, her voice firm. You had a chance to tell the truth, and you messed it up. I won't ever believe you again. You're the one who needs help, not Dad. Mary Beth burst into tears, heartbroken as she watched Liz leave with a scornful look, while I held my daughter close, feeling a sense of relief. I believe it won't be long before Andy and Daisy feel the same way when they learn the truth. Mary Beth turned back, angry. Did you do this to turn the kids against me, Andrew? That's low. Mary Beth, you turned against yourself. I just created an opportunity for Liz to hear the truth from your own mouth. She sighed, her voice trembling. All I want is for our family to be reunited. We used to be a happy family. I looked at her, my voice calm. You've made it clear. All you want is the money. But be clear, I'm not going back there, and I'm not going back to you. The only thing left between us is a divorce. You know that's the only outcome. Mary Beth's face hardened, determined to extinguish any hope of reconciliation. I disagree. The stupidest thing I ever did was marry you. Our 3 children are the only good things that came out of this marriage. Every other memory I have with you is ruined by your betrayal and cruelty. There was a time when I couldn't imagine life without you, but now I can't imagine life with you in it anymore. End this charade and get a divorce. I promise I won't badmouth you to the kids. I think you've done a good job of that yourself. Mary Beth's voice was cold, her eyes devoid of any pleading or remorse. Fine, Andrew. If you're determined to throw it all away, I can't stop you. But don't say I didn't try to advise you. You don't understand how powerful Ben is. If he wants to deal with the problem will be dealt with, one way or another. I raised an eyebrow, sarcastically. Is that a threat, darling? Mary Beth smiled, but her voice was sharp. Just the wisest advice I can give you. This isn't a David and Goliath situation, Andrew. In the eyes of a powerful man like Ben, you're nothing but a mosquito. We both tried to do the right thing for you, but you wouldn't accept it. You should talk to the prosecutor about dropping those ridiculous charges. I burst out laughing, my voice full of disdain. Thank you for helping me resolve everything with the kids, and I guess I should thank Ben for the check. Sorry, Mary Beth, but I've completely lost my appetite. Don't contact me anymore. Violating the restraining order won't be good for you. Goodbye. I shoved my phone into my pocket and stood up, walking away from the crying woman without any regret. That weekend, all 3 of my children stopped by the house, bringing me the comfort I craved after everything. Liz pulled me aside and whispered, "I finally looked up the case like you said, Dad. I didn't know Mom and your boss had taken things that far. Even though I didn't need to see that video, I understand why you had to suggest it. All 3 kids were wrong to reject you like that." I nodded, replying gently, "Honey, I knew you'd understand. I would never have shown that video if your mother had chosen to be honest. It's a shame. Things might have been different if she had told me about their offer beforehand, but now it's all in the past." I hated to see my kids leave, but Andy and Daisy needed to go back to college, and Liz had her own family. Once they were gone, I was left alone in the house filled with memories, now feeling empty. I spent that week packing up Mary Beth's things, neatly putting them into boxes. This house used to be the center of our family, but now everything had changed. Some of my friends heard about our divorce and were shocked. I just said we were going in different directions. Part of me realized they wanted to know more, but I saw no reason to relive those painful memories. On Friday night, I decided to treat myself, go to the movies, and stop at a fancy restaurant for dinner. While driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about the people around me, about the life stories I had never paid attention to before. I got home around 9 p.m., intending to take a hot shower and watch the news before bed. As I walked through the office to go upstairs, suddenly the room's lights flickered on, and 2 men emerged from the shadows, grabbing me. Both were much stronger than me. I struggled, but I couldn't break free. Fear consumed me. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I don't have anything valuable. You can take my wallet. Just leave. I won't tell anyone." One of them laughed, looking contemptuous. "No, Andrew. We don't need your belongings. We just need your signature. Sign this paper, and we'll leave immediately." "Sign what?" I tried to keep my voice calm, even though my palms were sweating. The other one shoved a paper into my hand, his voice rough. "Read it. This is just a copy, just in case you tear it up. The original is on the table over there. Trust me, you'll sign it. The only question is whether you want to do it the easy way or the hard way." I took the paper and read it. The contents made me disbelieve my own eyes. Official statement. I, Andrew Stevenson, with a sound mind, completely voluntarily and without pressure, hereby affirm that from the beginning to the end, I agreed to allow my wife to have intimate relations with other men. I only pretended to object to demand more money from my boss, Ben Higgins. When that plan failed, I became aggressive and attacked my wife, leading to my temporary detention at the mental hospital. I don't deserve to be released. I affirm that Ms. Mary Beth Stevenson, Mr. Ben Higgins, and Dr. Ederle have not committed any wrongdoing, and that they are victims of my sophisticated manipulation. My final request is that my wife finds happiness with someone else and forgives my mistakes. My life has no meaning without her. Signed, Andrew Stevenson. I can't sign this. This is a suicide note. A sudden punch landed hard in my stomach, making me double over, unable to breathe. The sharp pain spread throughout my body, and I struggled to catch my breath. As I started to move again, he shoved a pen into my hand and ordered, "Sign here." I hesitated. Before I could react, another punch landed straight on my back, making me nearly faint. My whole body felt shattered. I was nauseous and dizzy, but a greater fear was taking over my mind. If I signed, they would surely kill me. If I didn't, they would beat me to death and make me sign before the end of my life. Completely helpless, my hand trembled as I scrawled my signature. "Good boy, Andrew," he sneered, his smile cold. "You just saved yourself from more pain. Don't worry, I promise I'll be as gentle as possible. Now just keep your head still so I can get a clean shot, and one more in your hand to wipe away any traces. But I'll keep that bullet." He smirked, the bloody promise taking root in my mind like a sharp knife. Everything went dark. I closed my eyes and prayed, telling myself I had lost everything. Ben had won. He had taken my wife, ruined my marriage, and now he was taking my life. There was nothing left for him to take. I was preparing to face the final pain, but then, a loud bang, followed by the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. I opened my eyes. The scene before me shocked me. The guy with the gun was now unconscious on the floor, and the other guy stood frozen, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. In an instant, he lunged at the person who had knocked his accomplice unconscious, and the two wrestled like a movie scene. I was mesmerized, seeing movements so fast it was unbelievable. My rescuer dodged blows expertly, blocking every attack, almost predicting every punch. The climax was a powerful double hook punch that lifted the attacker into the air and sent him flying almost 5 feet before he landed unconscious on the floor. Then my savior turned to me, extending a hand towards me. "Hello, Andrew. I'm Kayla Feldman. Are you okay? Let me help you up." "I remember you," I said weakly, squinting. "You're Ben's bodyguard. So, you're here to finish me off, right?" Kayla chuckled softly, partly correct. "Yes, we've met, and it's true I used to work for Ben. But now, like you, I am unemployed." She picked up her phone, coolly calling 911. "Yes, I'm Kayla Feldman, currently at Mr. Andrew Stevenson's home, 1142 Forest Ave. I'm reporting an attempted murder against Mr. Stevenson. I'm his bodyguard and had to use force to prevent his death. Please send an ambulance and police immediately." She paused for a moment, then added, "I have video evidence of the entire incident. The immediate threat has been dealt with." Looking at me, Kayla reassured, "Andrew, the police will be here soon. When they arrive, let me answer most of the questions. You only need to answer when they ask you directly. Everything will be all right, but we need to talk, just the two of us, after things have settled down. Okay?" I nodded, my mind still overwhelmed with questions, but her confident voice reassured me. Kayla was so calm when dealing with the police, recounting everything in detail. By the time the ambulance arrived, both attackers were still unconscious, but paramedics managed to revive them with ammonia. The detective asked me a few questions to confirm Kayla's story, then quickly recorded all the evidence. Finally, the detective asked if I had another place to go. Kayla quickly responded for me, "Yes, but let him pack a few things first." I stuffed some belongings into a suitcase in a semi-conscious state, unable to understand why Kayla would save my life like that. As soon as the police left, she took me to her house, assuring me I would be safe. Kayla opened the door, leading me into a fully equipped kitchen. "It's late, Andrew, almost midnight. But I'm sure you have 1,000 questions. Would you like some coffee and a chat?" "Sure, thank you," I replied, sitting down with a cup of coffee in my hand. Kayla took a sip, then began. "Before you ask anything, I'll explain first. Listen to everything, then ask your questions." "Of course, Kayla. You saved my life, I owe you that," I nodded, feeling a sense of lightness in my heart. "Thank you, Andrew." Kayla started, her eyes sparkling. "I grew up in a family with 4 brothers, and from a young age, I had to learn how to protect myself. I became an IDF commander later, not because of luck, but because of those years of having to compete. Ben once convinced me to work for him, and as the security director, I managed all operations in his house." Kayla slowly recounted how she observed and protected me that night, every detail from how she arranged for the bodyguards to leave their positions so I could escape. When she mentioned the strange golden aura she saw around me, something that only a close, deceased friend of hers had ever had, Kayla's eyes welled up with tears. "Andrew, the only other person besides you who had that aura was a very special friend of mine, who was killed. I swore I wouldn't lose anyone else with that aura." I was speechless, moved by Kayla's silent protection and deep loyalty. She had risked her life to save me from a life I thought was over. Gently, I placed my hand on Kayla's shoulder. "Kayla, you've saved my life more times than I can count. But one thing I wonder, what does your husband think about this?" Kayla laughed, her eyes suddenly softening. "Husband? Who could possibly tolerate me, Andrew?" After long days of tension, this unexpected conversation with Kayla brought a sense of relief that I didn't think I could feel anymore. My question lingered in the quiet space of the cozy kitchen. "Mr. Feldman, your father?" I asked, trying to explain what perhaps both Kayla and I knew was absurd. "Father?" "No," I said Mr. Feldman because I thought you understood I meant a life partner, husband, or someone important. Kayla chuckled, her eyes twinkling with amusement at my continued skepticism. She gave a soft, wry smile, her eyes sharpening with a mischievous glint. "You're so naive, Andrew. I've never been married and currently don't have anyone in my life. Oh, there are many who try to pursue me, and I'm certainly not a young girl anymore. But Mr. Feldman, my father, taught me that if I don't find someone truly special, I don't need to settle down early. I've been waiting for the man with the golden aura. And unfortunately, you're married. Only for a short time. I'll fix that as soon as possible." Kayla laughed brightly, her eyes warm yet filled with determination. "Ben will quickly realize his plan to end you has been ruined," she said, her smile fading momentarily. "But he knows better than to send anyone to threaten me in my own home. If he acts, he'll make the worst mistake of his life. And he understands that if I've taken action, I won't stop until the head of the snake is cut off. Maybe someone can kill me, but it certainly won't be Ben Higgins. In the end, the two thugs confessed and signed plea bargains in exchange for reduced sentences, and they confirmed that Ben was the mastermind with the intent to kill and force me to sign the confession. The DA quickly transferred the case and added attempted murder charges to Ben's accusations. This brought me some relief, knowing justice would be served. As for Mary Beth, although she couldn't be charged with attempted murder, she was heartbroken when she heard about my near assassination. After the police returned my house to me, Kayla persuaded me to stay with her. I didn't want to return to that haunted house either, and honestly, I liked being around her. We never crossed any lines, nothing happened between us while I was still tied to Mary Beth. In fact, Kayla even said that my integrity was what she valued most about me. However, her presence always made my heart flutter. There was something between us, an irresistible attraction, like in the old song, "She's the magnet, and I'm the steel." Even just sitting watching TV together, without saying anything, I could feel the silent flame burning brightly within me. At the same time, Mary Beth found her own lawyer and was preparing for a separate trial in the lawsuit for perjury and forcing me into a corner. In this situation, she had no reason to delay the divorce. Just a week after signing the papers, my lawyer informed me that Mary Beth wanted to see me, something I completely didn't expect. "All right, Mary Beth, you've signed the divorce papers. What else could you possibly want to see me for?" "Thank you for coming, Andrew," Mary Beth said in a low voice, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "To put it simply, I'm pregnant. I know what you're thinking right away, and I understand that you don't believe it could be yours. But this will delay our divorce, because the law requires determining paternity before our marriage can be dissolved. Even though I know you had a vasectomy, the law acknowledges that sometimes vasectomies fail." I felt like I had been slapped, my heart clenching with pain. "Are you kidding me? You didn't even use protection with Ben, a man who clearly still has reproductive capabilities. And now you want to imply the baby could be mine?" Mary Beth's eyes welled up, her voice weak. I know, Andrew, and I deeply regret it. After years of being intimate only with you, in that moment I didn't think about protection. Yes, it could be Ben's, but it could also be yours, even just one sperm cell." I was so angry I didn't know what to say, but I tried to stay calm. "I hear they can do a non-invasive prenatal test. When can you get that done?" I've asked, and the doctor said it's safe after 7 to 8 weeks. "Right now, I'm only about 6 weeks, Mary Beth said hesitantly. "I'll arrange for the test in 2 weeks. If, by some miracle, the baby is mine, I'll step up and provide support. If not, the decision is yours." I stood up, leaving Mary Beth sitting there, sobbing as I walked away. Kayla, as always, was there to comfort me. She also believed the baby was almost certainly Ben's. She said everything would be fine, and nothing was more important to her than my safety. 18 days later, the test was scheduled. But then I got a call from Mary Beth, her voice trembling. "Andrew, I had a miscarriage. The baby couldn't survive. We'll never know who the father was. The divorce can go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrew. I ruined everything." Tears almost welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. Mary Beth sobbed as she ended the call, and I knew that deep down, that part of the painful past had closed. I had tried to be fair, after all. Our house was sold, half of the money and assets were transferred to Mary Beth. That chapter was closed, and a new path lay ahead of me. Initially, the two thugs faced charges of first-degree attempted murder, which could have resulted in a life sentence. But with the plea bargain and their willingness to testify against Ben, they only ended up with second-degree attempted murder charges and received a much lighter sentence of 5 years in prison. Ben, however, couldn't escape as easily. Facing a slew of serious charges and a DA determined to put him away forever, Ben accepted a plea deal of 40 years with the possibility of parole, hoping that, with good behavior, he might get out early within 20 years. Determined not to let the matter rest there, I asked lawyer Ira Abbott to file a civil suit against Ben to seek justice for the damage he had caused to my life. My claim for $25 million had the jury pondering, and ultimately they decided on an award of $50 million. Now, free of financial worries, I was still determined to continue working, living a life that Ben couldn't control anymore. Mary Beth wouldn't receive any of the settlement money. Although angry, I encouraged the kids to keep in touch with their mother. She would need them when she got out of prison in at least 5 years. The kids were disappointed in how their mother had treated me, but I reminded them that she was still their mother. As the divorce was finalized, Kayla and I were lost in the sweet moments of a love I had never felt before. The connection between us was indescribable, as if when she hugged me, the whole world became peaceful. Kayla helped me find a new house, where we decorated separate rooms for Andy and Daisy, cozy havens when they returned from college. Kayla, always attuned to security, insisted on building a safe room and installing the most advanced security system to protect our family. We arranged a Thanksgiving gathering, inviting all the kids and their friends to introduce them to Kayla. Liz and Daisy loved her instantly, and Kayla, with her natural friendliness, quickly blended into the family atmosphere. But Andy was different. He seemed to avoid Kayla, offering no explanation, but his coldness and silence were unmistakable. I didn't push him to speak, but a sense of unease grew within me. Andy only maintained the bare minimum of politeness with her, making me worry. Both I and Andy's sisters hoped he would share his reason, but he only responded with, "I don't want to talk about it." Even when I suggested family therapy, Andy refused. Kayla once offered to move out to lessen the tension for Andy, but I was adamant that none of us would leave. Kayla responded to my words with a gentle hug and a comforting pat. Still, Andy's feeling of being lost amidst the family weighed heavily on me. Then, 10 days before Christmas, I was heartbroken to hear Andy ask if he could go live with my parents for a while. Reluctantly, I agreed on the condition that he would return home with the whole family for Christmas. My parents promised to try to help Andy feel comfortable and understand his issues. A week later, Kayla unexpectedly received an invitation to spend the night at my parents' house. I wondered if that was how my parents were trying to connect Kayla and Andy, and although I was full of worries, I patiently awaited news. The next morning, my parents returned home with Kayla and Andy, all smiling. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling much lighter. We hugged each other in joy, then went to my office, turned off the Christmas music, and waited for Andy to share. Andy stood up, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I owe everyone an apology for my behavior in the past few weeks. My grandparents didn't pressure me to say anything, but they helped me realize that I needed to say something. When I finally opened up to them, they thought Kayla would be the best person to help me." Andy looked at Kayla, she nodded encouragingly, and he continued, "When I first met Kayla, I was really looking forward to getting to know her, because I knew she saved Dad. But what scared me was that when I saw her surrounded by a blue aura with white streaks of light. At first I thought I was hallucinating. I was even afraid it was a sign of something dark. Dad used to tell us about his autism and synesthesia, and I always felt lucky that I didn't have anything similar. But then I started to think that maybe I had some form of autism like Dad, and that made me feel ashamed." Andy took a deep breath and continued, "My grandparents invited Kayla to their house, and she explained about her synesthesia. She said that it had been present since she was little, and only with one person at first. Later, it gradually developed, and now she can see auras around everyone. She reassured me that synesthesia wasn't a defect. It's a gift, something few people have. I realized that the blue aura I see is around the people I love and trust. And now, Dad, my grandparents, and Kayla all have that aura." We all embraced each other, tears of happiness streaming down our faces. The family was reconciled, as if there had never been any distance. With a spirit of unity, I didn't hesitate. On Christmas Day, in front of my family and loved ones, I got down on one knee, summoning all my courage to propose to Kayla. Her radiant yes made the whole room erupt in cheers of joy. Our family was now truly complete. The following summer, Andy proudly served as my best man, and Liz became Kayla's maid of honor at our wedding. We welcomed a group of 30 people from Kayla's family who flew in from Israel, witnessing Kala Feldman becoming Kayla Stevenson. Her whole family was eager to meet the man who they heard had made their beloved daughter radiant and happy. They embraced me as a true member of the family, and I felt incredibly lucky. Soon after returning from our honeymoon, we received good news from Liz. She was going to have our first grandchild, a surprise joy that they had kept secret until after our wedding so as not to overshadow the big day. Kayla, 7 years younger than me and full of life, had awakened me in this marital life. She has a strong desire for affection, and I've never felt happier and more fulfilled than being able to make her happy. After the wedding, Kayla and I decided we didn't want to retire yet. I felt a longing to go back to work, but this time I didn't want to do it for anyone but myself. We decided to invest in our own company together, starting with a $30 million investment and taking it step by step. With running Stevenson's investments, I became extremely selective about projects. To ensure all decisions were sound, I hired Bill Spencer Jr., a talented but unemployed financial expert. When I met Bill again, I mentioned that he had left Higgins Investments. I looked straight at him and said, "But I knew that, didn't I, Bill? I remember warning you about Simtech medical devices. You remember, right?" Bill nodded, replying, "Yes, Andrew. You warned me that the name Simtech didn't have the right color in your eyes, but I suspected you were just hiding a potential opportunity." I gave the green light, and Ben Higgins loved the project. Then things went downhill. I took a sip of coffee and continued. I studied the law firm that helped Simtech get its patents and discovered many irregularities. Then, the name Simtech faded in my eyes, and I decided not to pursue it further. Ben rushed the merger, and soon after, Simtech's rivals sued Higgins Investments for billions of dollars for infringing medical device copyrights. This happened right after I won my lawsuit against Ben, and the company collapsed, causing everyone to lose their jobs, including you. Bill was quiet, nodding, then slowly said, "I really respect you, Andrew. I was wrong not to listen to you, and I should have known your honesty and integrity were real." I put my hand on Bill's shoulder, smiling. "That's why I invited you here, Bill. This time we'll do it right, we'll take our time, and I never have any intention of growing Stevenson's investments to the size Ben had. Kayla is the company's security director, and she'd never tolerate the kind of negative behavior Ben accepted. We don't have any wife-sharing shenanigans or any kind of deception going on here." Bill chuckled. "My wife would be delighted to hear that, Andrew. Sometimes I laugh to myself when I think about Ben, sitting in jail now, and wonder if someone's using him to satisfy their own twisted desires." I laughed out loud. Maybe that's the kind of justice Ben deserves. He used every means to control others. Now he's only got himself and maybe a little bit of karma. We laughed. Then Bill suddenly asked, "Have you heard anything about Don and Julie Sharp?" "No, what's up with them?" Bill shrugged. Don invested all his savings in Higgins Investments because it was consistently bringing in huge profits. But when the courts froze Higgins' assets to investigate the copyright lawsuit, Don lost everything. Now they're just living off of Social Security and Julie's meager pension. Thinking back, I couldn't help but chuckle. Don had been on board with Ben's plan without considering the consequences. And Julie was the close friend who encouraged Mary Beth to accept Ben's wife-swapping program. Maybe karma had caught up with them in a very fitting way. But on a different note, Kayla's family kept urging us that they would love to have another little one in the house to dote on. The idea of a child filled me with joy, but we both knew that meant I'd have to reverse the vasectomy. Big decisions were ahead, and though we hadn't made a final decision yet, I realized I was starting to think about it with Kyla more and more. Our lives were now truly fulfilling, with no need for any rush or tension. We both found each other and built a new, meaningful life together, walking through joys and challenges side by side.